The hottest trend amongst young founders with startups isn't a new app. It isn't some confusing AI technology. It's breaking up with your significant other because your company needs you more than they need. Because their company needs, you know what? I wrote this wrong, so I'm reading it wrong. Because your company needs okay. Because your company needs you more than you need them. I guess love doesn't help a company get funding. I'm here with Amanda Yun, a journalist at Business Insider who recently reported on this. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Hey.
So you wrote this story about young tech founders dumping their girlfriends and just going full, I don't know, startup mode. What got you curious about this trend?
Personal experience. Maybe this is just me being Gen Z and like oversharing on Maine, like or oversharing at the workplace like the rest of my generation. But I dated a startup founder and we dated for about 9 months before he like told me he was gonna move to San Francisco and like really put everything into his startup. And I live in New York. He was like, I need to leave our relationship in New York because I feel like I can't commit fully to my startup if I'm still dating you and we are living in different cities on different sides of the country. So, like any normal person, I like went through a whole box of tissues. I like cried on the phone to my mom, and then I interviewed a bunch of other people who had also gone through the same thing and wrote about it for my job.
Having so I'm in media and I live in New York just like you, but before that I was in software and moved to Silicon Valley. This sounds like such a cliche. People going into like founder mode and just completely obliterating their personal life. How does this happen? How does someone decide to do this? What are the people you talk to saying about their significant others?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I talked to a real range of founders, right? Like, I talked to one guy who was like 21, dropped out of Stanford to build his startup because he was so young, right? This was like one of the first real adult relationships he'd had. And he felt like there were just problems and he didn't really know what he was looking for in his relationship. He felt like there were problems in the relationship that really got brought out a lot faster because he was living on startup time, and the pressure of the startup had really like strained his relationship so much that he was like, okay, we are just fundamentally incompatible, like I don't think we should be together. He told me that he felt like those problems were inevitable and they would have broken up anyway, and in that respect, like building the startup just sort of like expedited the process. I talked to another guy though who was like a decade older than him. He was 30. And he really had like a different take on why he and his ex broke up because he seemed to have a lot of emotional maturity when I talked to him. He, expressed the desire to want to be a good partner, to want to support his girlfriend's needs. He just felt that because she was also living in another city, they were doing, I guess it's long distance. Yeah, I mean, like she was in Toronto, he was in New York. And he said that he would come home from work after working these like 11, 12, maybe even longer days, get on the phone with her. And he felt like he just had no emotional bandwidth to support her needs. And he told me that he felt like that wasn't fair to her. So he had a lot of like really flattering things to say about her. He felt like their relationship actually was compatible, if not for this startup. So there are a lot of reasons why individuals, right, would leave their relationships to focus on the startup. But the big one really is that the startup takes so much personal commitment, whether that is your finances or your energy or your time. And these founders just feel like it's either irresponsible to invest in anything other than that startup, right? Because they've already invested so much into it. Or it's just like really the relationship is not a priority, even if the relationship predated them really going hard on the startup, which in all of the cases, in all of the founders that I talked to, that was the case.
Okay, founders ignoring their relationships, letting those relationships end and focusing on the company. That isn't new. And I also know when I set up my interview for you just now, I said I wouldn't talk about confusing AI technology. But is there something about the AI boom right now and what's going on in that field that's making this worse, that's making young founders feel like romance is a luxury they can't afford?
Yeah, definitely. There is this prevailing notion in Silicon Valley, and I know this because my ex also had this view, right? That if you are a young tech founder, you only have like the next 2 to 3 years to lock in and really build something that capitalizes on the AI boom. Otherwise, you're gonna become part of the permanent underclass, and you're like not ever going to break into this upper echelon, right, of Silicon Valley tech elites. All the spoils of the AI boom, essentially, they think, will go to the people who cash in on it now. And so that's why a lot of these young founders feel like it really is now or never. And, they probably think that they like have the rest of their lives to find love and stuff. But the AI boom, that's only right now. And they really subscribe to this idea that like I have to build my thing now, otherwise I'm never going to get a chance like this again.
It seems so short-sighted. Like, I'm not old enough to verify what I'm about to say, but I believe it to be true. We could have been having this conversation 20, 25 years ago about the dot-com boom. Or was that 15 years ago? I don't even know. But, like, it feels like there will be the next thing that has this next gold rush in technology. AI can't be the last one, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're not alone in thinking that. A startup psychologist that I talked to said that he was pretty skeptical that AI really was this like earth-shaking thing that was gonna like basically end startups for good, right? He said, what you said, that like this happened with the internet. There's always going to be something that makes these founders feel like, there's like a real fire under their butts or whatever, that they need to do this now. Otherwise, it's not going to happen for them ever. He also said something interesting, which was that for a lot of these founders, right, the EQ is like the most undervalued skill that they have, right? And I think that's interesting because when we talk about these founders having this emotional reaction, right, to AI being the pressure that is really like forcing them or making them feel like they need to lock in right now, otherwise they're just going to be like poor forever or something. That's an emotional response, right? And so I think it's very interesting that the same startup psychologist who was like, I don't know, like whatever technological advancement comes next, we're going to see the same response, right? He's also like, these startup guys like are not very like emotionally intelligent, and they're having this like emotional response that is pushing them towards this idea that they need to like lock in now or never.
Also sounds lonely. Like, so what if, okay, you're a millionaire, you're a tens of millionaire, you're 100 millionaire because you worked all through your 20s at the cost of having any and all personal life. That doesn't sound like a great life to me.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I don't subscribe to this idea that like work is, worth giving up. I think like someone who could potentially be the love of your life, right? But I think that a lot of startup founders, it goes a lot deeper than that for them, right? The startup psychologist that I talked to also said that a lot of these guys see their startups as an extension of themselves. It's a part of their identity. And I think that that's something that makes what's happening with these startup founders who are dumping their girlfriends different than like a typical like work versus love conflict, because that's happened. Like that's an age-old conflict, right? Do I choose my career or do I choose my relationship? But it really is deeper for a lot of these startup guys, because when something goes wrong for them at work, it's not like they just, come home and they like change their clothes and, they forget about work altogether. It feels so much deeper because it feels like a personal failure when their startup is floundering.
After reporting on this, and you can read Amanda Yan's article in Business Insider, and living this reality yourself, I mean, you were dumped for a startup, as you wrote. Do you think founders are making the right choice for a rare opportunity, or are they going to find themselves at like mid-30s, maybe early 40s, like lonely with this wandering around with a pitch deck with no one to talk to?
Maybe this is just my like personal opinion because I was dumped, right? And you can argue with the wall with that all you want, but I just think that like if you are going to choose this path, and maybe break up with somebody, leave a good relationship to focus on your startup and stuff. Maybe you just like shouldn't complain about the loneliness epidemic as much, right? If these are like your choices. No, I'm kidding. I'm sort of kidding. I do worry that like, this whole like, wanting to achieve something for work it does come at the expense of like human connection. And we talk so much about AI and the AI of all of this. It is very ironic to me that people would put so much into capitalizing off of the AI boom and forego like the most fundamental human connection I would say that you can have in order to build something in AI.
Amanda Yen is a journalist at Business Insider. Amanda, thanks for talking to me.
Thank you.